And what are the other possibilities if, let's say, our great grandchildren or maybe even our grandchildren have the opportunity to have this in a mainstream way? And I'm not sure exactly, because I understand it's a very extreme procedure right now to have even rats go through this process. But could this potentially impact the longevity of human beings at an exponential level? Because as long as we can upload our brains into artificial bodies, we can constantly update our bodies. Or am I completely off here?
So I think you're touching on multiple points that are interesting. So one, I'll try to kind of tackle all of them, and I know that I'm speaking too long on every answer, so feel free to cut me.
No, not anytime.
So one aspect of longevity that neuroscientists have been playing with that's really creepy. It came out less than a year ago. I just spoke about it in a talk I gave 2 weeks ago that's going to become public in maybe a few days, is that we learned how to keep the brain of a person after they died active. So this was a study with pigs. It was never done with humans, but what happens basically in the study, if I simplify it, is that at 12 p.m., a pig is slaughtered in a slaughterhouse, and then they take its brain out just when it was slaughtered, and they put this brain in a dialysis machine that kind of injects into it all the needed nutrients and blood and kind of keeps the brain basically active. And then this brain keeps acting like a living brain. It keeps processing stuff. So this was a proof of concept that we can actually take the brain of something that died and keep the brain active. You can separate the brain from the body and keep probing the brain. So you can now create all kinds of science fiction ideas behind that if we do it with humans, we can maybe keep humans, at least for a few hours after they died, processing. And what processing means is everything. It means that you can maybe ask questions of a person who died. You can say, hey, who killed you? Like imagine the Sherlock Holmes movies that start with Sherlock Holmes coming to the dead body and just ask her, who was it? Says the butler. Thank you.
Wow.
That's it. So that's one
insane.
imaginary thing. Or you can imagine a situation where you ask someone like, okay, you died, but who does the will go to? Like, to who's getting the money? Or I want to say goodbye to grandma last time after she died. All those things would be, in theory, a possibility if you can take a brain and keep it alive for hours or maybe longer after a person died. So that's kind of one answer to longevity. We actually can separate the body from the brain and keep you there for a while. That's spooky. We haven't done it with humans. And even with pigs, it's unclear if they're still kind of processing or thinking or just like circulating. But in a way, This was a big leap from nothing ever going to happen to, okay, we now know how to do that for a few hours. So that's one answer to longevity. Then there's a more kind of philosophical answer to longevity, which is there's a few labs, a few colleagues of mine that try to extract memories. So they kind of try to put something in your brain when you're alive that listens to your memory if you want and kind of tries to retrieve them and code them and then in a way puts them in different locations. So the example that I know of is also with rats. They take one rat that knows something, in that case navigate a maze, but they learn how its mapping works in the brain and put it in a digital chip that kind of listens or eavesdrops on the rat's movement, and then they put it in a new rat's brain, one that has never seen the maze before, and somehow the rat that has not seen the maze before knows how to navigate the maze as if like memory was transferred from one place to another. So this is again a very small memory and only with rats, all the caveats you can imagine, but the bottom line is that we just transfer memory from one animal to another. That's another way to extend longevity. You basically take Sean's memories when he's getting old and you just move them to someone else. And in many ways, our memories are our story. So you get to live longer, not by you living longer, but your kind of consciousness gets to live in some other place forever, and you kind of retain more information. You suddenly get the experience of your forefathers in your brain. And then there's the kind of most concrete way of cheating death, or kind of living longer, that we're playing with, which is pure biology. Right? People don't just die. It's not like a cell that one day it kind of stops functioning. Usually we die of something, and as we die of things, it becomes again an engineering problem. So if you die of a heart attack, long ago it was a doomsday thing, like you die and that's it. But now we know that heart is a pump, and we can actually put different heart inside, and you can even be without a heart for a few hours as long as there's a machine that's pumping blood into you. And while we find different hearts for you, we can keep you alive. So suddenly a heart is an organ that we can replace, same as lungs and same as kidneys and so on. So suddenly we start to understand that there's a lot of kind of room for parts in our body that we can replace. And if you take it to the extreme, you can start saying, okay, like a lot of things that fail we can replace. Generally, dying out of thing becomes an engineering problem. If this person dies from that, we need to kind of make sure that he doesn't get that or that, and give him the right drugs that kind of will stop whatever process is killing him right now. And people could live, forever with us constantly replacing parts. That there's a colleague of mine who said it kind of in a cynical way, but a beautiful way. He said no one would agree to buy a computer, a laptop, if they had to sign a contract that says this laptop is the one you're going to use for the next 80 years. That's it. You're never going to change your laptop. We all buy laptops thinking, okay, we're going to replace it when things kind of change in the world. But this is kind of how we treat our body. We basically are born with one and we say, this is it. This is the one I have for the next 80 years, not changing anything. And now we're basically saying, okay, this one is decaying. So maybe we can start giving you, new things that will make you get upgrades to this body and just keep living longer, because all that is you is in your brain. So as long as we keep the brain in the container working, we can keep you alive longer. I should say, as an ending to this long argument, that it's not obvious that this is a good thing. Kind of fear of dying has always been with humans. We always were afraid of that. I think that a lot of institutes thrive because of that. Like we have churches and synagogues and places that basically tell you stories about the afterlife, because they kind of promise that the next life is going to be much better. Like right now you're kind of you're rehearsing, but it's the real thing is there. And we convince a lot of people to do things right now that are, kind of affecting their current life because they believe that something better is going to come afterwards. And in that thing, we kind of created an entire story that we live by right now without knowing a lot about the next one, but kind of having beliefs on what's coming next. And every religion and every kind of culture has a story that deals with the fact that dying is so difficult for us, accepting the fact that we just cease to exist one day. So we had to kind of cope with it by inventing new stories. But it's not obvious that dying is not good in many ways. It gives meaning to life, the fact that there is an ending to it. Every event is meaningful. It also means that life is divided into parts. It's not obvious, for instance, that you want to be old forever. Like if you give someone longevity, you might not want them to be frail and not with a clear mind and unable to move and a burden on a lot of their family and close friends since they're 100 to 900. We want, if anything, to be kind of to even it out, such that if you live to 900, the first 400 you're still useful and energetic. So in many ways we can solve the problem of not dying, but this isn't the solution necessarily that society wants to avoid it. We want to either change the meaning of life or change kind of how old age looks like and how we treat old people and how we treat like a brain that's not as good. So I went in 3 minutes over a long kind of laundry list of like things that what we can do, how it will look in different domains, but also whether it's good and bad. I leave it to your audience and to you to think like where you stand on that, because you can tell that I'm conflicted on whether it's good or bad.